UVs. So who knows, except for the one person who raised his hand, what are UVs about? Do we have any idea? UVs. You probably heard of UV radiation from the sun. This has nothing to do with that. Different thing. Yeah. You know UVs before also? You know two people. Okay. Yeah. Enlighten us. UVs. Yep. That's perfect. So it's a reference so that we know where our texture will fit onto the mesh. Exactly. That's what it is. So, whoa, that's nice. Uh, so to see, let me just make something here. So whatever, sphere. If we right click and hold, you'll see object mode, face, edge, vertex, and we have UVs. This is an additional component. So the UVs initially, they just seem like the vertices. I can select UVs, they're green. I tried to move them, nothing happens. What's this all about? I can't really do anything to the UVs in here, but I can change them, or I mean, I can select them. But in order to change the UVs at all, we would have to go into UV editor. This is the UV editor. So this is the only way in which we can actually see what the UVs are doing in UV space. So this is a different world. This is UV space, two-dimensional world. So we can navigate the same way here as we do in the world space, but obviously there's only two axes. So here I can select UVs, and you see they will also be selected over here. So this, in other words, is a two-dimensional representation of all of these polygons. Right there. So if you think about it, this polygonal object is actually made up of small two-dimensional planes, right? The polygons are actually two-dimensional, right? Well, a tri is technically two-dimensional. If you have four vertices, you can skew it. But anyways, this is, so if all the polys were to be then just distributed on this UV space, technically we could, oh, I need to actually start the recording. Did I do that? Yeah, hello recording. I did, good. So, right, so that makes sense. So technically, there's not too much problems actually representing a three-dimensional object made up of 2D polygons perfectly in a two-dimensional space, right? Makes sense. The only problem becomes when we actually want human-readable UVs. So we want UVs that actually make sense. So when we look at them, you can open them up in Photoshop and texture. Yeah. So this will become a little bit more clear. We just let me actually, if you Google UV pattern, you will find a lot of UV patterns, like this one, for instance. So typically just checkerboard textures, preferably one-to-one, perfect resolution. And also a lot of these patterns you will see they have numbers or letters. So let me just throw this in the scene here. Okay. No, no. There. So, I'll throw this in here. There's a way to activate a checkerboard pattern in Maya and so forth, but actually I prefer having a texture there because then we're just sure that it's not going to mess with the scale of the thing. It's just a normal texture that's applied. So this seems to be, okay, there we go. So, press number 6, we're in textured mode. So we can see the checkers. This is promising. So if we go to poly modeling, let's make some other primitives. So I can assign that, that material that I just made. Oh, I guess I made a couple. So you can see all these primitives initially, they look pretty nice. They have the checker pattern. The numbers are the correct way. Things are looking pretty good. So if you see something like this, it's not too bad. You know, the textures are applied. Here we can start to see a little bit of, it's not too bad. So it means that there are UVs on these polygonal primitives initially. So if we select this, you can see that, oh, okay, so it comes with UVs. This is just the default UVs for this particular primitive. Also for the sphere, you see that it had UVs. See these are the UVs. And for the cube, it has UVs. So in the UV editor, there's this image here. You can turn it on and off. This is just to either display the underlying texture or make it go away. It's still going to be there technically. You see there, it's still applied. It's just that, no, just hide it. Okay, so here we can see more clearly the UVs. We can also go to view and we can put it on shaded view if you want. Then the UVs will be shaded. They're blue if they're the right way, and if the UVs are flipped, they will be green. Or, I mean, the red. Anyways, we'll come back to that. So, this, we get rid of these. So this particular configuration of UVs is what we call the UV layout for this cube. Of course, there's no like rule, or this configuration could be arranged in an infinite number of ways. You just move around these polys. Currently, we can see this is just a particular configuration. That's just the default configuration for a polygonal cube in Maya. Problem though, if I do something to this cube, so let me just copy the cube. So whichever object you have selected, that's the object that you'll also see the UVs for. So I'll go and extrude this polygon up. So we'll do that. You see, nothing happened to the UVs. Apparently, it didn't change. Obviously, big change over here. So what's going on here? Can anyone sort of try to be analytical about this and figure out like what technically is happening here? Yeah. And why does it appear stretched here? Yeah, it's still technically at the start of this area. In other words, it's actually just displaying that pixel essentially, right? So that pixel, if you can imagine a line over here, which would be the length of this edge, is now displayed all across this poly. So that's why we see this very strange stretched result. It's because it's stretching that pixel along that poly. So obviously not going to look good and technically be just horrible. So this is what we would call texture stretching, texture distortion, what we don't want. So this is the problem whenever we start modeling or start configuring anything, the UVs will not update. So it's not like you can just model and then the UVs will be fine, or just rely on these original UVs. That's why we first have to model, then you have UV, then you get perfect UVs, then you can texture. That's the order of things. Sometimes I see people as you have an existing texture and then you fiddle around with UVs trying to fit the UVs to the texture. That's not the appropriate way to work, because then you have no assurance that the UVs, for instance, are uniform, that you don't have stretching. It's very hard to tell unless you're actually look deving this with a checkerboard like we're doing currently. We can see very clearly if you have any sort of image texture distortion. Make sense? Huh? A bit? So anything unclear about this? Yeah? Well, how do you solve it? What, the texture stretching? Uh, yeah, you can make UVs. You can make automatic UVs, for instance. Automatic. Now that solves it because it just boom, it makes UVs. So you see, we have a lot of these projections, and it just spreads out the polygons. So this would be what I said initially. You know, of course, you can just represent any sort of polygonal asset perfectly over here because you just spread the polys out, right? So that would technically fix it. So now you see all the stretching is gone and the configuration is totally different. So how we fix it is that you actually make the UVs. You have to make uh, the UV layout, essentially. So to make more sense of this, what we're looking at, you can see that obviously we have 6 uh, polys over here represented in UV space, and they correspond to the 6 planes of the cube. If I go to face mode over here and hover over these, I can actually, you can see that they will also be highlighted on the model. So this poly is that. So this is currently just perfectly actually represented over here. You know, and this is a very, very simple model. It's just a cube. But what we want is a perfect representation, or as close as possible, to the polys in world space over here in UV space. And since we're here just dealing with perfectly, like perfect squares, that's a pretty simple job. So if we go to texture mode, if I go to my selection tool and right click and hold and go to UVs, I can grab this UV. You see it's also highlighted right there. This UV is that one. This face is this one. So if I go to move tool now and I just on purpose try to make this not so nice, we're introducing texture distortion because this polygon is no longer represented very nicely over here. You see there's a mismatch between the actual shape of the poly and the shape of the UV representation. It's like you have a bad map. It's not matching. And this is just the case. Like when you start making manual UVs, this is what you need to be careful with. You don't want texture distortion. Also, we don't want overlapping UVs like this. Because here I can just do anything. I can go like that, and that would be it. And I could technically export this OBJ with, or this model with these UVs, and it would be horrible. And there's a lot of things that would, yeah. All right, so the question is, if you have a model that's already been textured and then the UVs get messed up, and now you need to somehow salvage the textures and put them back onto the new UVs. All right, so that's a pretty advanced question. But I don't see a way of doing it in Maya, but in ZBrush, for instance, you could take the textured, let me see how you could do that. No, you would need the original version of the UVs. But then you could project the textures to 3D data, like polypaint data. So there would actually be RGB values assigned to each vertex in ZBrush, for instance, and then make new UVs, and then you can project that vertex data onto the new UVs. But you would need the original UVs. Yeah, you would need the original UVs. Yep. So the question, if you're making, yes, so if you're making all the sides the same, can you just stack them together like in a game situation to save texture resolution? You can. You can do that. There's a workflow issue with this technically when we're working. So that if you have a lot of overlapping UVs per object, in this case, the object is a cube, then if we, for instance, want to start to bake normal maps and so forth, these processes can fail. Right. So the technical consideration usually is that we do not want to have overlapping UV shells per object. In other words, what you would do is that you would consider each of the planes as an object. Right. So the object you'd be texturing and making normal maps for and making beautiful is the one side. And then you just copy it around in your game engine or in Maya or whatever, right? So that kind of modular thinking that you're getting at is very important, not just in games, but especially, of course, in games. So the more modular you can approach things for like building sets and so forth, the better. So you can repeat a lot of surfaces. So that's a good question. So what you'll see me working with here, though, is like I will not be doing that per object. But just to take away from that is to think that you can copy objects infinitely and just use the same texture over and over again in clever ways, right? So that's a very common approach for games. So does this make sense, right? I'm just like moving this UV around, and literally if I click here again, what I'm doing is just that I'm moving the UV on top of the underlying image. That's all. See, if let's say I wanted this top, it would not be in any way technically correct, but if I want that number one here to be visible on top of this poly, I would move all these UVs like that. Now the number one is there. This is not how you want to work with UVs. So like I said, sometimes I see students working like this, where you have an underlying texture of some sort, and then you try to fit the UVs. Oh, now it looks nice. But it's not technically correct, right? Because when we apply this checkerboard texture, what we should see is this. You should see more or less uniform uh, little squares, and you should see that the numbers are not flipped, and just, this nice flowing checkerboard pattern. So this is a nice way to also for your report, or if you want to show off your model, to show that you don't have texture distortion, is to apply a checkerboard texture and also show the UVs like this. So, make sense? That's the correlation here that we're dealing with. So yeah, so you see me here, I can select UV, I can move UVs, I can just do a rectangular selection and scale them, rotate, whatever I want to do, just like any other component. Um, I can select the UV shell. So currently this UV layout consists of one UV shell. A UV shell is continuous UVs which are merged together, much like you would merge edges together in a polygonal model. You can merge edges together in UV space. So under here, cut and sew together. Here you can, if I just click this line, I can tear that menu off, and then I can cut. So now I'm just cutting those edges. And we have a little tool here under Tools called Move UV Shell. I find that very handy. So if I grab that menu and put it over there, Move UV Shell tool, I can just click there every time I want to actually just click once to access the UV shell. So if I'm in my selection tool, like click Q and then go to UV, I have to go there, just like UV shell. But I don't have to do that every time. I can just, well, whatever. I can also have the tool right there. But here you can see I can just do whatever I want to the configuration. So currently I have 6 UV shells. Right now the UV shells are just actually each of the polys. Or I can connect these, whatever. So this starts getting confusing. You see when I select this edge, that one is selected. Right, you can see right there. But it's the same edge technically in world space. It's actually connected in world space. It's just that we've moved them apart over here in UV space. So if I place these close together, and I can go edge mode, and we have this little handy feature, so move and sew. So that will actually move them and merge them together like that. And now they're merged back together. This is very exciting, right? You can, yeah, this is not the most exciting part of CG, and but you know. Yeah. So here, how many UV shells? Yes? You don't. You don't need to do anything. Yeah. Just having fun. Isn't it fun? No, I mean, so yeah. Why do you have to cut it? Um, why not? No, it's just this is how you can work with UVs over here. You know, I can cut things, I can sew them back together, and now I have like one. I can. Okay, so I go to back here and it's like, yes, question. Um, yes. So okay, uh, let's not do this anymore. So if you want, you can spend a lot of time working with UVs in this editor. And it is getting good. It's getting much better. It now has some new nice features. But we're, okay, I'm just kind of explaining you how the UVs work. But I'm not going to actually be editing the UVs too much in Maya. I don't like it in Maya. With that said, a lot of people do. And every year, students try to convince me that now it's getting pretty good. And then I see, no, it's still not very good because it messes up the scaling of things. It's just not there yet, I think. But anyways, depends on which approach you take. But it does have 3D cut and sew tools. So now we're talking about unwrapping. This is the process that you're actually going to have to unwrap the model. So if you have any, you can just imagine you have any sort of physical object and you want to make it flat. You have to get a pair of scissors and start cutting. Those will be your seams, and then you flatten the thing out. And then you make an arrangement, a 2D version. Literally, we can also do that in 3D. So instead of messing around too much here, we rather rely on an algorithm which will allow us to actually just unwrap the model. So all that we need to do is to place the seams. In other words, we use the scissors sort of, right? Yes. So I'm going to be using another software for that. If you want, like I said, yeah, I will leave it to you to experiment with the 3D cut tools in here. And maybe for a lot of things, that's pretty good. But I do think it's worthwhile showing you another software. It's called UV Layout Pro. So this is the, well, apart from Photoshop, the only additional software we'll be covering in this class. But it's fairly intuitive. All it deals with is UVs. That's its thing. So it's obviously quite powerful for UVs. So judging from your faces, I do think we're going to take a short break, and you should get caffeinated. Some people are sleeping. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. Yes? Yeah. All right. So I got a question here right now. Like, so what does this program really do apart from actually making seams and then unwrapping? Nothing. So that's all that this does is that you make seams and then you unwrap. That's all. So if you're using Blender, like someone said here, and it works for you in Blender, perfect for you because Blender is free and this costs money. Uh, okay, here are the people. Oh, you didn't bail. I thought you had it with UVs. I was saying this program only does, you make seams and then you unwrap. That's it. So, but it costs money unless you can find it and borrow it. I'm recording this, shouldn't say it. Huh? Yeah, no, there's a mute button. There's a website. It's a pretty good website. You can find things. Anyways, so yeah, so that's all that this does, but it costs money and that's it. But if you're happy in Blender or in Maya or whatever you want to do, basically the thing is you don't want to be projection-based UV unwrap like you used to do in Maya because it's very inefficient. As long as you're doing this automated unwrap, you're good. But it's the same sort of methodology that I'll be showing you here in Headus UV layout. So, but it's on the lab, so if you want to hear, you don't have to pay, so that's nice. So hotkeys, here are some hotkeys. There's a user guide. How do you want to open this file? I don't know. I didn't think about that. Let's see. The user guide has a quick start, which is sort of strangely put at the bottom. But there's a quick start. And this is basically what we're going to do. So we're going to drag and drop an OBJ file, which stands for object. It's the way we're going to be able to export things out of Maya. This sounds scary, but it's something you'll get very used to because sometimes we do want to get the thing out of Maya to do something to the mesh other places, such as right now. So this is all that we're going to be doing. Just mentioning this if you're on the lab and you just want to open this user guide and find the quick start. It's a very nice sort of summary of all the things that we're doing. So, okay. This is it. This is the interface. It's very retro. Let me, wait a minute, I actually did this. Let me do it again. So, CG Art 1, Lecture 2. We made a chair, right? Of sorts. Let's have a look at it. So, yes. I'll just show you quickly how to unwrap, how to do it in Headus. The big kind of potential with this is if you have a little more complicated meshes. This is not going to be very complicated. But if you have some... Seems like I was trying to build that and it was very successful. No, I mean, that if you have slightly more complex shapes, you'll find that Headus or similar softwares are very, very powerful. Oh, I thought a little bit about your question during the break here, like why do I actually have to combine things? Why do I cut it? Why do I combine it? I think I'm kind of getting where you're coming from with that question. The point is that the whole point is that we don't have to, at least today, we don't really have to do any of this. You could just do like an automatic, like here, you press automatic, then you get UVs, and that's technically fine because all the polys will be perfectly distributed in the UV space. You will be able to have textures applied, and everything is nice. But then you cannot manually change the texture in something like Photoshop because it's not human readable. You just have a bunch of these patches with information. But that's fine if you're, let's say, you're sculpting in ZBrush or you're texturing in Substance Painter or you're using some of these processes which are 3D based. Yes? Question? Yeah, yeah, you can import it into Photoshop, but it's horrible. Yeah, I guess for design it's nice. But for technical texturing, no, very slow and horrible. But like for like Mari, very, very, very powerful. It's like Photoshop on steroids for CG. So Mari or Substance Painter, which is not as powerful, but it's really, really, really powerful for games and just generating quickly like amazing textures. Uh, so there are all these options, or even like what is it? This simple thing. Anyways, all these processes are 3D based, so you don't have to go in there and technically look at the UVs and paint. That's the used to be the case where you would do everything in Photoshop and sort of, yeah, yeah. So technically you don't have to, but the point here is that we still want to have human readable UVs. Like in a technically good CG asset, we do want to be able to open it and actually do some uh, changes to the texture or whatever in Photoshop if we need to, right? So that's the point where we start combining these polys into more and more continuous UV shells, right? Right. But that's not a process I'm going to be doing here. I'd rather do it over in Headus. So yes, so back to the chair. So anyway, so that's all that we're doing. It's so if we have something like this chair, this obviously has some repeating objects. Granted, they're mirrored, but I can probably get rid of that. Get rid of like this just for the purposes of exporting this to generate UVs. All these kind of identical copies I don't need to include. So right. So these would be very simple, but you get the idea. So if you have an entire asset, you know, you can export every single little object and export that as an OBJ, open that in Headus and unwrap it and bring it back. Or you can just do all of those, which is nice. And then we can go to, so under mesh, we have combine, separate, right? So we've talked about that. But I can essentially just select all those. So here, it's really important that you already have like nice, you know, topology. Everything is kind of legal. You don't have unmerged vertices or flipped faces and all of that. It needs to sort of work. If there is a problem with your mesh, most likely you'll get an error message in Headus, and it will tell you, hey, there's a problem with such and such poly or whatever. Okay, but here, so under mesh, we can combine. So here I can combine, and there you see it combines it to one object. Like technically it's one object in Maya. It's one object, but it still consists of multiple meshes, right? There are, but I can delete history. That's pretty good. So the opposite then would be separate, and Maya would then just separate all these meshes back into separate objects. So combine, separate. But I combined it and I deleted history. Everything should be good. the orientation is correct, so Z-axis is facing forward, all these considerations, and we've frozen the transformations, so freeze transformations. So freeze transformations, delete history, all of that. Very important. Then I can export selection as OBJ. So you just need to find something called OBJ export. It stands for object. It's a very versatile format. You can go between various 3D softwares. Here, I don't really need the material to be exported, but whatever, it's okay. All right, so this will be chair. Export selection. And now that should be in that scenes folder in my project. Let me try to find it. Granted, this is old school. So it should be in scenes. Yeah, so I just need to highlight the folder in which the OBJ was placed, and it should find it. I didn't find it. That's depressing. Let me export. Let me put it on somewhere easy for it to find. Or just copy the thing I just exported. Didn't I put it here? Chair? No. Let's try again. Oh, it is there. Oh, it's just, okay, it's going to the wrong project file. Right. So, I'll put it in the correct project file. Here. And I can put it in data, I can put it in scenes. Typically, I like to put things in data, so things like OBJs or different things I'm working with. There, let's see if Headus is happier. So if I go to CG Art 1, where is it? Oh, down. There, and then data, and there it is. So you just, yeah, do your best to navigate through this retro menu system. Load. Loading. There it is. All right, so here I can go and set this. This is initially set like this, I think, so it just freezes the Z-axis, so I don't know why it does that. So you need to go under Display, click Free. Now I can freely rotate, just like in Maya. Oh, I just don't, I have to press Alt, but I can move around. So a couple things to start moving these objects around. I can hold spacebar, so spacebar, middle mouse button, I can go like that. And now I just need to start unwrapping. So currently this is sort of the world view where we do the edits. So what we're going to do here is basically just make cuts. So like I said, it's as if you had these objects in front of you and you take a pair of scissors and now we're going to start cutting. So where does it make sense to have seams? So this used to be, well, still is. We do want to avoid to have like seams, you know, on very prominent areas. So if this is going to be really close to you, like in this asset, probably we don't want to seam right there, maybe. But essentially, you press C to cut, and you hover over an edge, and there it makes the selection. And then I press spacebar or Enter to actually perform that operation. So here I'm starting just to cut this open. Like that. Probably I want to make a little cut here for this to be unwrapped a little bit nicer. You can sort of imagine that if you had this three-dimensional object. Press C. Sometimes this is a little funky. There. And then it selects that edge loop. See there? but I don't want to cut this one, so I can hold backspace, just erase that, and enter. So it made those cuts. And I'll go up here, backspace, enter. Okay, so once I'm happy with the cuts, I can drop these to UV space. So a D for drop. Now that's gone. I'm gonna need to cut this a couple of times, maybe once here or something, and then over here. So there are no rules to this. Essentially, just a consideration you might want to consider is to not place seams where they would just be facing us too much. So, anyways, D. Now they're gone. They're in UV world. To see where they went, we can press number 1. So this is UV space. So what we're looking at here, this is 0 to 1. The quadrant, same as in Maya when we open the UV texture editor. This this area here is 0 to 1. So essentially, eventually, all the UVs will be placed within 0 to 1, right here. You can see that it continues, and we do have more of these patches. So these are, when you get a little bit more into modeling, you can also spread UVs among multiple patches, so UDIM patches. Anyways, for this course, we're going to stick all the UVs in here. So anyway, so that's where they are, but let's leave them there for now. And let's just keep cutting. So 1, 2, I can go back and forth between this world view where I'm cutting and UV view. Or press right there. So this is nice. It's like a very boring computer game. There. Now we're in UV mode. Shift F. Shift F. You hover over something, you press Shift F, and then spacebar. There. So it unwrapped it. So it looks very green. Green is good. So it just means very little distortion. Yep. So this just happens to be the shape that Headus found reasonable for this particular form. Sometimes you might want to have very straight UV shells, and you can press R for that. It looks nicer. Sometimes you're introducing a little bit of like texture distortion, just ever so slightly. So it just depends. So it depends on if you really want something very nice to texture manually, this would be the way to go, right? Again, if you really want to maintain minimal texture distortion, maybe this would be the way to go, right? So, but this is a very, very powerful feature. You press R, it will straighten things. Question? R. R. Don't know what it stands for. Shift F, spacebar. There you go. The R operation will only work on these very logical shapes that can be very easily straightened. Okay, so back to number 2. So this is it. This is how you just keep going. Sometimes it doesn't work. You have to hover around. So Headus can be a little annoying once it starts not behaving. Seems to be working. Yeah, so here you just apply time. It's very, yeah, like meditation. Yeah, it is quite nice, actually. I'm not even joking. Because it's just this mindless thing, you know. Of course, this will soon be replaced by AI, and then we can't do this anymore. It will be a shame. I'm surprised it's not already. Anyways, bigger topic. Drop. Yay. Shift F. Oh, so you can hold spacebar, and then I can use the mouse buttons. So I can use left mouse button to rotate, middle mouse button to move, or right mouse button to scale. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because I don't have a uniform texture placement anymore if I do that. Obviously, this will have a lower texture resolution. So I don't want to scale. You can see that Headus tells me that, no, don't do that because it became red. It means it has much too little UV space. Or if I scale it up, it will become blue. So, no, too much UV space. If it's green, it just means that it's uniform to the model. Yeah, so if there are some areas that you really know that it's not going to be very visible, for instance. So let's say, yeah, so a good example, whoops, would be, yeah, so underneath, like underneath the seat, perhaps, just depends. Then, yeah, I could do that. Make that maybe even like tiny. So there's textures there, but I'm like pretty sure it's not going to be visible. You would have to be very sure though. If it's in a game, again, and maybe the chair can be, it's a movable object and it can be moved around, or then no, it needs to be there. So typically, I'd say, yeah, just, but that's the reason. You can make those considerations. Like technically, we do want sort of uniform. Yeah. Yes. So let me not overthink this at all. I'll just do that. It's too early. So go something like that. Shift F, space bar. Beautiful. So this is kind of boring, right? Yeah, that's true. Rigging is also boring. Now, for me, anyways, you should get into Python scripting. If you like rigging, if you feel it's for you, you should get into Python. Oh, question. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So this is an excellent question you have there. So so essentially, I said that you would want all the UVs within 0 to 1 eventually, right? So the question is, what if you have a 512, let's say, texture resolution, or a 4K, like 4096 pixels? Would that make any difference? No. So they would all be within 0 to 1. So you could have like an 8K texture, or a 32K texture, or a 128 texture. It doesn't matter. It's completely relative. And that's the beauty of this, because once you have a solid model, you have solid UVs, you have little distortion, it's completely independent of texture resolution. This also means that I would really recommend you work at much higher resolution than your final output. So if you have a in-game asset and you want a very, very low texture resolution, you do want probably to work much higher, and then you could export any output you want. That would be much better way to go about it. This would also mean that you would have that higher fidelity version if you want to later update the game, or even if you want to have like a really close level of detail. Yeah, yeah. So typically when you work, you just want to work with as high probably resolution as you can. So typically 4K or 8K would be good. Yeah, like level, you're talking about level of detail? Yeah. So if you have different, like varying levels of detail, so some game engines will handle this for you. So if you have a large text resolution and you go like far away, it will generate lower level LODs for you, right? And then the engine blends between those versions when you approach the asset. Yeah, so that's a good question. So, but that's the beauty of this is that it's all relative, right? Question? I'm not sure if it accepts FBX. You can try. FBX just has more options. So you can do like animation data, and there's more to the FBX format. OBJ is very simple and therefore also very versatile. So for something like this, I would use OBJ because it's just the geo when you get it also exports the UVs and normal information if you have some smooth normals or something like that. Yep. So I don't know why I'm making you sit through this, but I think it's all right. Just so you sort of get the idea that, oops, sometimes there's just a lot of fiddling around, as I'm sure you already know. You just have to sit down and do it. Oh, there is also like you can hold Shift C. If sometimes only pressing C will not select the entire loop. Shift C should do that. Yay. This is something that would also kind of work very nicely with the automatic unwrap because these are very simple pieces. So it's up to you if you, I mean, for a little more advanced pieces, like I said, Headus will be probably a lifesaver in some cases. Oh, I didn't cut that. Nah, Shift F. So Shift F just starts that initial operation, and then you have to hit space bar to sort of stop. Just starts unflattening and then, or flattening, unwrapping. Yep. It does have an automatic packing feature. Uh, ZBrush now has some interesting new UV tools as well. Should look very powerful. That they just made. Okay, so anyways, there we go. So I can save this OBJ now. Save done. So now it's at least saved with these UVs, so that's nice. So I won't lose all that work. So if I open up that in Maya, well, anyways, let's pack it first. So you can pack it here, or you can pack it in Maya, you can pack it anywhere you want. But this has some packing features. I don't really use them too much, but I think they're pretty good. A lot of settings. Oh, you can look here. I guess that will tear that off. Yeah. Don't know. Have to try. Who knows? There's a lot of very. I'll just click pack all, so that'll pack it. But there's a lot of powerful features actually in here. Obviously, because this program only deals with UVs, there are a lot of features, which is kind of under the hood. So if you want to read up, or yep. But so that's the automatic packing. It does pack everything into 0 to 1 very quickly for you. As you saw, there are some settings there. I don't really ever mess with it too much. But anyway, so you can do it here, or just if you want, save it. And then once we now export this, so I just overwrote that file, and there we have the UVs. So you see it's pretty forgiving. It's just, yeah, it is a little export, but I think you'll see that I think you'll get quite used to exporting things here and there. It's just something that we do. So let me see. Oh no, I need to import that. Checkerboard. So, and Headus also so there's number 1, this is UV mode. Number 2 would be the world mode, which I no longer have access to. But number 3, here we have sort of to check for seams. So essentially you can press T. So here we have a checkerboard, we have some numbers. So essentially this is the same as we were doing earlier with the checkerboard pattern. So we can see that we have very uniform checkers. We can see that the numbers are not flipped, which is a good sign. These are upside down, but that's just the random placement of that particular UV shell. They're not flipped. If I go here, you see they're actually correct. So this is very good. This is nice, and we should see the same when we apply that texture, that little checker over here. You had a question? Yeah. So what happens if something's outside the box? What happens? What do you think happens? Well, no, actually, it'll be there because it just kind of repeats. What am I doing? You disappeared. You interrupted my brain. Here. There. See? Beautiful. So what happens if they're outside? So actually, let's grab this UV shell and we'll move it over here. So what's happening is that this texture is technically just repeating. So if we were to place this, there are some tools here, I guess. So move exactly 1 unit over here. That will move it precisely 1 unit over there. So technically you wouldn't actually see anything. It would just be the same texture. But this, the whole reason for this is that that we're not really going to be covering in this course, but if you have, let's say, a very large creature or something in a VFX production, and it needs to have more texture resolution than you can fit onto here. So then you could do like literally 100 patches. You just spread these out like 10 rows that way and 10 rows up. So then you could have like 8K times 100 for that creature. So, which are called UDIMs. So, yeah, so that's a larger topic. But that's why that does this. For the most part, like for in-game assets or also just simple normal CG assets, typically we do want everything within 0 to 1. The other very important technical workflow thing here, if some of these UVs were to be like that, like ever so slightly outside 0 to 1, you would probably experience some errors if you bake normal maps or something like that. So there, yeah, you asked me to cover normal map baking and all of this. Yeah, I don't know how long we're supposed to be in here today. What does it say? 11, 15. So I think we'll do that probably next time then. No, you have to fit it in here in 0 to 1. Yeah, you can't just move it over there and then it's fine because no, it needs to either be in 0 to 1. The only reason to move it over here is if you have UDIM solutions where you would have another texture file coming in for this patch. We're not going to be doing that. And for games, this is not really common to do. It's still easy in a way. Yeah, it's just getting used to this UV world. But definitely just be considerate of all this because also if the UVs are overlapping like that, that could also cause fails in baking and just be technically incorrect. So very, very important is that none of the UVs are overlapping like that. You can see it. You can see it a little bit more clear if you have the shaded view on. Also, that they're inside the 0 to 1. You also don't want to have them too close to 0 to 1, actually. So I'm not really a game developer, obviously, but this can cause problems with light baking and so forth in games if they're too close to here. So there are all these considerations to make. And there are reasons to sort of stick to these technical measures because they do actually cause problems if we don't. So just want to really make sure, like double check. So here, I don't like that placement, whatever. Just keep things tidy, no overlap. You should be good. The other thing that could happen, obviously, sometimes these shells could be flipped, and then you would just flip them back. So now they move that around. Where's that? Modify. Oh, there's not a loop. So these probably getting very good, these options. I should, all these green ones are new. So anyways. That's cool. So we do have flip, for instance. So flip, see now it's red, flip. We should see now that the numbers are actually flipped on here, as you can see, or no? Yeah, no, they're flipped. Yeah, it's technically okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a good point. So if I wanted to, that's an excellent point actually, because here, if I wanted to save texture resolution, I could just copy. So now I'm going to go here. I'm going to separate these. So there's no rule to this. Like if you didn't want to do this, you wouldn't have to. You could have two copies and they could have separate textures and that would be fine. But if you really wanted to save some texture resolution, you could opt to have one of these have flipped textures because like you said, if it's a wooden texture or something, we don't care if it's flipped. If it's something that has numbers or letters or anything that's going to be really visible, if it's flipped, then obviously you don't want it flipped. Depends on the situation. So here I can do -1 scale, and now this is flipped, but technically that's okay. Right? So here, yeah, not nice if it has numbers, but if it has a wooden texture, you would never know. And we just saved a little UV space. So the other very, very important thing, especially for games, not so much for VFX, is that we really optimize 0 to 1 space. So that's the other reason why you probably Here would probably I would have pressed R for this if this were an in-game asset, and so that we could really stack these UVs. All this is wasted data. Like all these empty spaces are wasted data. So this is arguably a much, much more important consideration for optimal optimization, much more important than poly count. Because if you have to load in an additional texture file just because you didn't optimize this well enough, that's wasted data. It's not optimized. So all of this would not be finished probably for an in-game. I mean, it's not bad, but it could be much better. So all of these could be arranged in a way so that all these empty spaces would be diminished. That would mean that obviously, why would you do that? But it means that if you can imagine, this would be more compact. That means that I could then scale everything up a little bit, right? Because if I condense it, if it becomes more compact, I can scale it up. If I can scale it up, it means that I have more, it will get more resolution. Right? So you're getting more resolution for the same image file. That's the whole point. That's the other really important thing where you might consider some of these areas, like especially here, under this seat. These polys don't need a lot of resolution. All these are considerations you want to make to have a really highly optimized in-game asset. So these would be more for games, less for VFX. We don't have to care so much about it. You just have solid UVs and then more or less optimized. That'll be okay. Right? So there's probably a little bit more noodling around with UVs for an in-game asset. So that's the unwrapping and how we get it back. Makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what we're going to cover today. If you want, what I didn't do now and that I would probably want to have done, make a simple version, like make a cube or something. Actually, we have 15 minutes. Yes. So we're going to do something. Because I'm going to just show it on this chair, but obviously you could do a simple cube or something. But the whole point of this is that we end up with this layout. This is our UV layout. Let me actually, let's see. Okay, I'm going to set the project back to the one we made today. Then save the scene. Okay. Oh no. Right, so this would be sort of the old school way of texturing, is that we would export this UV layout to Photoshop. And that's what I want you to do actually for this course, because you need to be able to do this, to know how this works. So this is literally just a layout. It's a reference for us when we are going to be texturing. So now they moved everything around, so I need to find this option. We're not going to be doing this. Oh, here they put it. Okay. So some people use these PSD networks. They are not very good. The reason they're not very good, first of all, you don't really need them, but they're also not very good because if you add, like, let's say some blending modes and different things in Photoshop, they don't really appear the correct way in Maya. So I don't rely on these. The only benefit is that there would be a link between the Photoshop file and then you can click Update PSD Networks and all of that. But it's not really used much at all. So anyways, if you want to try them, be my guest. But here we're going to do UV snapshot. This literally just takes a photo of this thing. in 0 to 1, and you'll get this layout. So here it sees it's going to put it here in images. It's going to call it out UV. Okay. I'm going to change this strange format, just like a PNG or something. Here, this is obviously random. This would in no way limit the texture resolution that you could apply to the object. It's just the resolution of that particular image file. So 2K, okay, so apply. Did you do it? Oh, yeah. So, oh, it put it in here. Oh, did not. Is this the right one? No, it's not. And should put it in here. There it is. So we can open this in Photoshop. So this will now open that 2K PNG file. It's 1:1 image ratio, obviously. That's the only thing. So, okay. No. What? No, it went there. Okay. It can stay there. That's fine. Better. Oh, go away. Anyways, layers. So this is our empty layer. We can make a new layer, and we can go to the bucket tool. This is the paint bucket tool. Yes. Anyways, and then I will fill this layer. Now the layer is black. I can put that layer on the bottom. And there we see the layout. Right? And then I can shift select these two layers, and I can hit Control E for merge. Now we just have something like that. I guess there's probably a setting on that export which would give you a non-transparent one. I don't know. But anyways, that's how you can do that. Essentially, this is it. This is just a very, very simple image, 2K. It's the reference, and now we can start texturing. So if you want to try this, you go here and, for instance, go to textures.com or something, and we can find some wood or, So even if you're texturing a chair or whatever it is that you're doing, you don't have to find a chair. For instance, if you want some wood textures, find wood, you just need to find the texture. And these resources, for instance, you can look at the texture to see that they're very plain, like in the lighting. The lighting is very diffuse. So if you just grab a picture of a chair, you'd probably have a lot of like specular highlights. Like if I search for chair, texture, I'm sure you can find a lot of good things there, but also, let's see. Anyways, yeah, these are pretty good. What you don't want, okay, so something like here you can sort of see there's some like shadow and highlights and specular highlights. We don't really want that in the texture files. So I think we'll talk more about this next time. But if you want to just quickly try, just grab like some file and try it. Oh, I do need to log in here. So you can make a free account. I don't remember my thing here. Like that? I don't know. Probably not. Oh yeah. Very surprising. My brain is improving. Anyways, small. So essentially, we do want to have us when you're downloading resources. It's beneficial to go as large as you can. If we can grab this one, good. And also that other website that I mentioned, it's very good. You can find the texture packs, whatever, these resources. So if you're nice with each other, you can like find some resources and put them somewhere on the server or something so that you can access. Anyways. So anyways, so this is just a little text. So I'm not going to be attaching this little texture that I found directly to the material, right? Um, I'm just going to be using this in Photoshop to start texturing. So then I don't want to put it in source images. I can put it in data. I can put it in, there used to be like a textures one. Anyways, put it in data, whatever you want to do. There. So I can hit Control A and Control C to copy, and then Control W to close. And then I can hit Control V, which will paste this here. And since this was incidentally a 2K resolution, this is kind of what we get. So this is a weird texture for the chair, but whatever, let's try. And spacebar, you can hold spacebar and left mouse button, you can move around the canvas. So who feels intimidated about Photoshop? No one, that's good. Yeah, you can make it seamless, and then all that we did with the UVs would be unnecessary because everything is just seamless and it's great. So for a lot of things, especially, yeah, you can rely on seamless textures quite a lot. Anyways, but the whole point of having these UVs is that you can customize more of the texture a little bit to make it fit to the object. But I think we're gonna have to come back to this next time. But here we could do what would it be? Screen. Okay. So we have these blending modes. You've had some introduction to Photoshop, right? Okay. So you're familiar with this. So anyway, so we like these blending modes, so lighten, screen, all these. Basically, these you see they're together. They do that. The opposite would be multiply, so they do that. So if I want the opposite, I can go Control I to invert that thing, and then do a multiply. Now I'll have the opposite. Oops. So I don't want to move this one. So I want to lock this layer. So if I try to move it, see I can't move this layer. It's locked, but I can move this. So anyways, so if I place this texture under here, this is literally what it's going to do. So I'm going to have to go back to Maya and have a look. Where did Maya go? Here. Oh, where did it go now? There. And then, what am I looking at? What's going on? What is this? This is, oh, that's that. So that's convenient. So that's the top facing seat. And that's what I'm doing. So this is how you have to sort of organize. You have to look, what am I looking at? Okay, so I can save this Photoshop document while I'm working. And again, we're going to look at this more next time. But here I can do, this is the chair. This is where I'm going to be working with it. And I'm including the layers. So everything is in there. And this I can actually, even though I'm not going to be attaching the file directly to a material, I'm not going to be attaching the PSD file anywhere. But I like to put it in source images anyways, because then when I'm saving out new files, it will be stored in that same directory. So anyways, this will be chair, it has the layers. So let's export a simple color map, which would be as simple as unchecking this. We have to uncheck the layout. I don't want that to be baked onto my texture, obviously. So just turn that off, and then I'll make a new layer. I'll probably go to the paint bucket and just fill some color. So now the chair will be, let's just make some other color. Now the chair will be this red pinkish color, but the seat will have this, and it will bleed onto some of these other parts unless I do something to it. But it's fine. Save as, this time, and like TIFF, Targa, these would be lossless formats. PNG, you can also use. JPEG, you can use. I'm going to do a color, sometimes called diffuse or albedo, depending. I'm going to call it color. Yeah, we'll cover that next time. So anyways, so now I stored that thing, and I should be able to go into the material. What happened here? This. Okay. So what I should have done initially, just hide away some of these UI elements that we really don't need. So all this will help a little bit. Anyways, so yeah, so here I can go to the material and let's just, I'll make a new one. So I'll make a, let's make a Blinn or a Lambert. Let's make a Lambert. So now I have a new Lambert. I want this particular material to be applied to this asset, which is the chair. This also might get a little confusing, so look at this next time. But I can go to the hypershade. And essentially this becomes a very nice way to organize things, because let me delete unused nodes, which get rid of everything that's not in use. This is the new Lambert. Double click that. This could be the chair material. So then I'll select all the objects in the asset and then right click assign material to selection. So this is now a very, very nice way to just quickly select also this asset, like select objects with material. So you can have as many objects as you want within the same asset and the same UV layout. Right? So that sometimes students get confused with this, so that if you have like one asset, do it need to be like one continuous mesh or like one object? No, it could be many multiple different objects. Personally, I like to not combine them. So because it just makes for a much easier selections. I can select these different meshes, I can work with them, right? I don't really want just one object. So here they're just, see, they're in a group. That's also nice, but they're in one material. And there we have the layout, right? Might be confusing. I don't know. Or you can have more layouts per asset, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. Or if it's a VFX asset, like have 100. Yeah. So this is where it might get a little confusing. But for this simple little asset, it would be no problem to have everything within one little 0 to 1. And it could be 4K, 2K, 1K, 512, 256 final output texture. It doesn't matter, but I would suggest you work higher. Right? Okay, and then simply we're just going to select this chair material, and then in the color, we're going to go to File node and turn that off, and Image, and Chair Color. There it is. Yeah, if it's going to look worse, no, it's going to look better. Yeah. If you're using Arnold, yeah, you want to use the AI standard material. Yeah. So don't use any of these other materials like Lambert. It's really just to have a quick, when we're working here, just to show it. If you're going to be rendering in Arnold, you want to use the AI materials. But that's it. You see, it worked. We have it now. It's on here, and it's bleeding onto these other parts, which were just randomly placed on the UVs, like this one. And to see the underlying image, we click there, and that's it. So we're looking at the same here as we're looking at here. And that's it. That's how you go back and forth. And now I can just do changes to this if I wanted to. And I would save as, and I would just like replace that other, what was it, a PNG, right? That's it. And then, yes, back and forth. But like, for instance, if I wanted to go like this. So I'll do a polygonal lasso. Oh, crap. Yeah. And then right click, select inverse, and delete those parts. Now I shouldn't have any, the wooden texture should only be on that little seat, and then I could do save as. PNG share color. Say you want to replace. Yes. Okay. Then it will save. Then I go to Maya, and then I can actually go on the material attributes. On the file node, reload. And there. Oh, see, and I forgot to turn off the layout. So now that's kind of baked onto the texture. Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. So if you wanted that look, you could bake it in there. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to turn that off, and then I save it. So you see it is back and forth. I have to go like this. Yeah, it is a little annoying. But I think this is a very useful exercise to really understand. This is the basics of everything. You know, this regardless if you're doing 3D texturing wherever you're doing it, you still need to understand the workings of this. There you go. Let's see. What? Working more. Yeah, and as far as working with UDIMs and so forth, that's not in this class, but I usually do that in the CGR2 class. So yeah, so this is basically it for this class. I mean, this is it. And then next time we'll do a little bit more in Photoshop and just texture a little bit more like this, and then bake some normal maps probably, and that would be fun. Yep. Uh, uh, I'm confused. I don't know. Yeah, 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 yeah. Which assignment? I forget. I don't know. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's the point. Yeah. So yeah, I would hope you're at the point where you can start with the UVs essentially. Yeah. So I'll be in the lab tonight. You know. Yeah. I'll be there if you want to come by. Anyways. Okay. All right. Uh. Oh no. No, this is it. You're not missing out. All right. Thank you. See you at the lab. Those of you who want to show up, I'll be there doing my thing and I'll be available for you there. All right. Thank you.